So last week, New World Season 1 dropped, and in its content and its Season Pass offering, a lot of the activity cards talk about clearing expeditions. Some of them say clear a level 60 expedition. One of the challenges, one of the things that, as a part of the chapters, talks about clearing the newest expedition, the Inferian Forge. And on Twitch chat, we've been talking, and you and I have been talking privately, like about New World's difficulty and the struggle of content, using terms like regular versus the mutations. Where does this fall? What is being communicated? What is being expected? What kind of difficulty should be desired, and how other games have a impact on what New World's doing. But this also doesn't apply just to New World, it applies to other games as well out there. And in curiosity, obviously focusing on a New World, focused channel, New World Central. Guys, if you haven't subscribed to that channel and you like New World content, that's the place to be. You'll get all the news guides and more. I put out the poll, and the results aren't surprising. Basically kind of split in the top, bottom, and mid, where people feel the overwhelming majority out of 566 votes and 13 likes was 65% felt like the game balance was just right. 17% feel like it's too hard, and 18% feel that it's too easy. I've gone and picked some comments, and we're going to go through those, and then we'll discuss them. John commented, "I wouldn't mind the difficulty if instance content did not require a certain number of people, but rather scaled to having smaller groups. My friends and I refuse to play with randoms, so we never tried to get into this content." Then we've got the number one says, "I like the difficulty of the dungeons, but I definitely think that there should only be 4 difficulties. Level 1 would be story-based difficulty, should be complete without enhancements, leveling, gathering gear, equipped. Level 2, current tuning of the base difficulty with current rewards. Repeatable quests must be completed at this difficulty or higher. Level 3, hard mode. Gear enhancements require mistakes should be punished but not spirit breaking. Any bis drops should be attainable at this difficulty. Mutation level 10 by the end of the dungeon." And then level 4, expert mode, min-max difficulty with dungeon-specific gear and expertise. This is for the misogynists. No drops better than level 3, but should offer the most rewards outside of gear, gold, season XP, and umbrals. And then essentially, let's see here, I think I have a few more. Robin says, "My party got smoked the first 3 times. I did the raid, and as an Elden Souls fan, I voted just right." And then Mr. Viking Mead says, "I voted too hard, but I understand the just right votes. I'm just a very casual player, and it just to me seems more time, effort it takes to get the base expedition clears. Declining to put in that time and effort remains to be seen." So I think a wide selection of different opinions regarding the difficulty as it exists. Chris, why don't you talk about your experience, because you have finally got your expedition clear, but it was something that you had to put a lot more time into than either was expected, or that maybe a normal player who doesn't stream would really struggle to kind of get into the base content. What did you think, and what do you think now that you have cleared the content?
So I liked the difficulty existing that I cleared. It felt really good to clear. It took a lot of work to clear. But what I don't like is that the number of activity cards, the number of seasonal journals, the amount of, there's achievements tied to it. There's a narrative component. Not to mention, so much of the community expects you to have this gear score that there's only a couple ways to easily and reasonably get there, especially for somebody that only plays 1 or 2 days a week. And so to call that your entry point, where they use terms in the UI, the actual UI flavors them like with, I believe the exact word is both normal and regular. Mm-hmm. It says normal and regular, which are kind of synonyms. And so under the normal difficulty tab, there is only one difficulty available, and it is called regular. And the fact that you called it normal and regular really implies that it is your entry point. It hasn't been dumbed down to like a easy mode, story mode, any of those things. And the lack of that says that it probably is your easiest mode. And so the fact that they have mutators available for everybody that wants the challenge, I do think it would be fair to have an entry point for people that want to go from 500 to, let's say, like 580 inside of level 60 dungeons. I don't think it's totally crazy for people to be able to do that. Instead, you have something where a lot of times the groups that form for these normals require higher item levels than the groups that are available to join for mutated. Even though, like, clearly if I had the item level for mutated, I might be willing to do mutated. Like I'm queuing for this because I don't. So I think there needs to be something below this, but I don't think it's about making this easier. I think it's about the normal tab getting an additional difficulty applied, at least for 1 or 2 dungeons. If it's only for 1 or 2 dungeons, that's fine. And those are your entry dungeons. Like that's the game doesn't have 8 entry dungeons; it has 2. Right. That would be valid, but there starts to be this like, how do you learn all the dungeon mechanics? How do you get better at dodging? How do you get in the habit of acquiring gear through here? How do you get in the habit of 5-man instance content? They gave us dungeons in the open world, but that's not how they're used. They're used as effectively these big trains, which Guild Wars has trains, Final Fantasy 14 has trains. Sometimes World of Warcraft kind of has this train type element where like a big, huge conga line of 200 players comes through. That doesn't make you better. So that's where I think it's lacking, is it's a hurdle between level 60 and gear score 600. That the expeditions would be a really fun way to span that gap. And the activity cards and the journals encourage you to feel like you should be completing these things. And yet it's hard to get your first clear.
Yeah, I wonder like what would be like a good compromise, because one of the things we were talking about and I hold is like the question is a clear guaranteed? And being that even you do get rewards, and now that the season pass does have that unlock, like that has fundamentally changed a little bit of the design principle, because you could go and run up to that wall boss any number of times in that day and still progress. You would still get drops, you'd still get loot, you have the player driven economy that is connected to all of this. Right, 25 times per day, which ultimately that's quite a lot of time. Like that's roughly speaking with a couple of pools. Like I don't know anybody who has that amount.
It takes you like an hour to find a group sometimes, hour and a half.
Right. So it's like all in all, like you're running the content, but the content not being designed as a guaranteed clear gives the counterpoint of that it doesn't become boring and dull as quickly. One of the challenges is like, oh, if you did have this piece of content that you could just go and run it over and over again, and it doesn't then push back on the player, like something like Elden Ring, things like that, where it doesn't then force you to kind of start to question like, hey, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? You brought up a couple of key like features that I think would actually enhance this experience. One of them being a DPS meter. One of them being able to give yourself feedback on data, because you're like, am I even doing better? Like it sometimes some runs, some pools, like I felt like that was going really well. And then, yeah, we got hit by a mechanic. Okay, we got to learn and adjust. But ultimately the game isn't necessarily even educating you on how are you performing at all. Like, where is the weak point? Why did this one run go so smoothly and this one run just completely just bites us in the dust? And so my general and current thought on it, because within the content offering, I think there would be, and there is a case for a new piece of content, not necessarily taking the current content and making it more accessible, but offering a different kind of content that they could offer at that level, right? Like, and you bring up a good point. Like, there could be saying, hey, we're gonna mark Genesis and Lazarus like as those dungeons, right? Like those are gonna be those, and we're gonna keep the others and offer a visual guide. One of the things the game could do a lot better at is actually educating you on, you want to do this, and this is where this is where you spend some time to really kind of get that dust knocked off and really understand this piece of content, what it's designed for at level 60. I could completely get behind that. But in terms of like the Forge and all these other ones that they keep adding and the mutation system, we're going to keep those tuned at exactly where they're at. But my thing is the theory, when I look at what the game offers, I think it's lacking in terms of like not that I'm advocating for match-made content for the expeditions, but a match-made form of content that is PvE focused, because we have match-made forms of content that are PvP focused. It'd be interesting to see if they would offer something like that, not as a way of like overtaking the existing offerings, but think of like the invasion system. You and I both haven't done any evasions because they're scheduled content outside of windows when we're normally playing the game. And so that ends up being a piece of a miss. And I think if they were able to bring in like a practice level of invasion, we're going to match you in, we're going to throw mechanics, we're going to bring bosses and mechanics from the expeditions in here as a way of training the player base up in terms of this. They talked about adding in mock wars as well. I think that would be like a really nice thing. And in order to do those kind of systems, you have to have cross server play. So I think a lot of stuff when we look at the roadmap and the things that New World is currently lacking and the frustrations that people are going to hit in season 1 by returning, like I look forward at the roadmap. I'm like, man, yeah, it will be nice when all the cross server stuff's in play. And it's unfortunate that part 1 happens next this summer and part 2 happens in the winter, and it's not going to make the expansion. And I think that's going to be something that's going to bite the expansion hype in the butt a little bit, because people are going to want to try to get into expeditions and do these things. And when you're limited to just your server selection, it ends up feeling, like you said, like it could take an hour to get the people to run the expedition, which is just, especially if that's
before you get inside.
Right. That's not even, you haven't even entered. But in order to be able to pull from a wider range of players who are also looking for that content, I think would also help ease a little bit of that up as well. Because right now, you take what you can get, and sometimes that works out positively, and sometimes that doesn't. And that's just the nature of the piece of content. Any thoughts you have on what I shared?
I think that's really what it comes down to, is just empathizing that it is not crazy to say that somebody just got into this game and that they only have 2 to 4 hours a week to play. And that an individual session can't be more than 2 hours. And so I would say to anybody that is okay with the difficulty, I do not want to remove the difficulties as they sit. And I do not want to endanger the rewards that you're getting for those by saying that this easier version should offer the same rewards. I'm saying, in addition to the supported content now, let's be aware that imagine you had a friend who just hit 60, you don't have the chance to play any of the same time as them this week, and they decide to go hop into any of these lobbies. It's really hard to find groups. When you find groups, they fall apart regularly. And so, like, just imagine if by the time you get a chance to play with your friend again, they've had this series of miserable experiences, and you're now having to play catch up on